Dear brothers and sisters, let's continue our journey that will bring us to August 15th, the day on which we will rejoice and celebrate the Assumption into heaven of Most Holy Mary, and let's also continue our spiritual journey, that day after day, meditation after meditation, must grow in quality. A journey that must be taken more and more seriously. A journey that must be taken with responsibility, with conscience, with awareness of all that we are living. A path that must be lived with the same attitude, with the same spirit, and with the same attitude that is typical of the Son of God. And that even in this gospel passage, is highlighted in totality. A passage that is immediately subsequent to what we have meditated last Sunday, through our Pontiff, where Jesus finds himself living, despite himself, a bitter disappointment, from those fellow citizens, from those friends, from those relatives, from that community, who he had lived and to whom he had given himself for 30 years. But in a moment that community turned against him. They preferred not to believe, not to understand, not to accept, not espousing what was said and revealed to them. Merely being indignant, rejecting, and then going so far as being ashamed of Jesus. But my question to you is, did Jesus stop? No, Jesus advances. Did Jesus surrender? No, Jesus advances. Did Jesus complain? Did he become depressed? No, Jesus advanced and turned into benefit all that had proved to be impediment by acting in two ways. On the one hand, increasing Jesus' own action, thus going to nearby villages and thus bringing to a multitude of people that saving proclamation, that good news, that Jesus directly from his voice brought to all these hearts. But then, further increased his action by sending those who had completely divested themselves of themselves. Those who followed Jesus and desired to do the will of God in totality, and who for this, not for the knowledge of the Scriptures, not because of any alleged wisdom, but for that having stripped themselves of themselves, for that having put the will of God in front of everything, had become worthy spokesmen of the saving mystery of God. This church, friends, is the fruit of the mentality of the Son of God. A mentality that advances, this unstoppability of the Son of God who we have seen in this gospel passage, which we saw in the gospel of the previous time, are manifested today through the realization of this church, the birth of this church, because once again, God has been disappointed by this humanity. Has been betrayed by those who called themselves his own, by those who called themselves sons, who called themselves friends, who called themselves brothers and sisters, bartering him for a plate of lentils, preferring something else to God. Has God given up? Has God become depressed? Has God stopped? No, God has advanced, and this church, this land of love and this mystery are proof of that. Here then God acts again, on one side from himself, so here is the descent of the infant Jesus on June 13, 1947, giving birth to this mystery. And then acts through those who were worthy of bringing this proclamation of salvation to the whole world. Here in primis is Maria Giuseppina Norcia, she who made her own, this mentality of God. This non-surrendering of God, this always advancing of God. A woman who has advanced against everything and everyone, who has advanced beyond obstacles, beyond disappointments, beyond misunderstandings, beyond the mockery, and the thousand offences, and so our Pontiff, who has borne this mystery, out of love for this great, immense, woman. And out of love for the Father, who called him personally. And in spite of all the trials, all the insults, all the situations, who found himself despite himself living, has never stepped back a step. I live this daily and testify to you, never have I seen Samuel retreat a step. Never have I seen our Pontiff back down, give up, become discouraged, but on the example of Jesus, on the example of heaven that advances, always we have gone forward, always he has advanced and always he has spurred us forward, to have this mentality, against our trials, against all those sufferings that daily we are called to live and we are inevitably called to live. And this is the winning, irrepressible mentality, that God's children must have, that those who belong to this church must have, those who follow Christ. Here it is that to advance therefore, means to be on the way, but to be on the way, does not mean to remain oneself, does not mean to remain the same, as we were before we came here. To advance and to set out on the way, means to renew oneself, means to change, to mutate, to live that metamorphosis, become new, reborn from above, to become as God desires we become, to truly become those instruments, who are worthy of this mystery, who are worthy of all the love that this God pours out upon them, of all the wisdom, that to every meditation, to every spirituality, to every act of magisterium, is poured into the hearts of these children. One can't stay the same, one can't be the same as before, one must necessarily change and elevate oneself. Hear therefore, the path that in this gospel passage Jesus proposes to us. Here is that attitude I was telling you about earlier, not only in the non-surrender, not only in advancing untamed, but also in that journey that leads you to lose everything, to find everything in Christ. Primarily not a solitary journey, Jesus here is not talking about a journey done alone, he is talking about a journey done 2 by 2, so those two who bring you who have to put in the center brotherhood. That bring you to put at the center that building in relationships, that leads you to build a community. Those two who can be brother and sister, of flesh or spirit. Who may be friends, who may be an engaged couple, who can husband and wife. Where there is no one who rules over the other, trying to dominate and crush the other, who stands on a pedestal to subjugate the other, who plays games against the other, behind the other's back, to put him on the spot. But two who cooperate, two who help each other, two who support each other, two who where one can't make it, the other makes it, and when the other doesn't make it, the one makes it, this brotherhood, which is often treated as something useless, but which is center, one for all, so one who gives himself to all, but those all, who mutually give themselves to that one cannot get to that one unless one goes through the all. Here is this living brotherhood that must be lived in the totality. This serving the brothers, not using them, this love that one must have to have for the brother, for the sister that God has placed next to you and with whom must walk, with whom must build this community, with whom must come to do God's will. But here is also this total abandonment to the faith of God. This total abandonment to the love of God. This total abandonment to God that each of us must experience. Here is this not bringing the haversack, this not bringing money, this not bringing bread. This doesn't mean that today we don't have to eat anymore, we don't have to dress, we have to wash, but in the journey of faith, you must take away that to let God fill you in totality. Often we think that we are advancing, of walking, and instead we only turn on ourselves, because we always remain the same, because we don't implement that metamorphosis, that change that God asks of us, because often more than abandoning and trusting in God, we trust that social position that we have achieved, that bank account that gives us the tranquility, that career that gives us satisfaction, that human love that we have managed to find, and then God on the side. But this is not how one serves God. All good, praise thanks be to God if you have these things, but first God. First the love of God, first the trust in this God, who follows you step by step and helps you on this path of metamorphosis. Where each of us is called to leave, to strip off our own self, to clothe ourselves of this God. Here is this path, where so many times inside this backpack, that we bring on our shoulders, we put too many things, too many human things. I come from a country where the mountains are predominant over everything, and everyone knows that the more things you put in the backpack and the harder the climb becomes. And you have to find the right compromise between what you really need, because help yourself that God helps you, and what humanly is useless, so you leave it and you surrender to God. And when you walk, when you advance, that you really experience that abandonment, not when you only live by those things that give you security and tranquility, and where at the first novelty, one immediately loses control, one despairs, one gives up, or worse, one sits down, if not even goes so far as to complain, or affirm oneself in totality. But that path that brings you to trust God completely, think about that path that Joseph and Mary had to take. When they left, they went to Egypt, that total abandonment to trusting God. That total abandonment to God's plan, to what God was calling them to, without questioning the whys and wherefores of so many things. Trusting in this God, hence on this journey we are called to bring only what is essential. So here then on the one hand are the shoes, those shoes that are symbolic of that journey that you are called to make. Of that journey that God brings you to make. Seek and you will find, knock and it will be open to you, ask and you will receive. There is always an action that starts from us first, to then arrive to the answer of God. First you seek and then you find, first you ask and then you receive. First one knocks and then it will be opened. So here is that path you have to take, an inner path, a path of awareness, a path of transformation. And here is that staff that symbolizes the authority that God has given to this church, that God has given to His children, in His new and eternal covenant, we mentioned earlier. That alliance that gives you the right to talk about God, that gives you the right to talk about the mystery of God, that gives you the right to announce to everyone this new good news. And here is the tunic, the only tunic we are called to wear, not two tunics, a tunic. Just as we must have one heart, just as we must have only one face, to live in total sincerity. Here then is this tunic, that becomes our outward appearance, not a tunic to live the mystery of God and then another tunic to live the things of the world. Not a tunic to talk to the ministers and then another tunic to perhaps speak negatively to or about the brothers. A single tunic, one outwardness that represents in totality our inwardness, that is what it means to be sincere, to be transparent, to be loyal, to be true friends of God and also to be true brothers, not brothers who plot behind the other sister's brother's back, but brothers who help, brothers who protect, brothers who justify, who understand, much more than to judge, and of this, God will give you much more credit than that credit you think. You delude yourselves into thinking you have, if you do good and the brother does bad, without you helping him, without you giving him a hand, without you taking care of that brother, without you resisting that temptation of emerging, of making yourself look good, of putting yourself on a pedestal, of feeling more important than others. This is not the teaching that this church gives. This church teaches you to be friends. This church teaches you to love each other, to love yourselves as God loves you, to put God, family and work, on the scale of values as a priority. This church elevates you to the heavenly beauties, to the mysteries of God, so that then you can be even better than what you were, even more extraordinary for God, to God's eyes, of what you thought you were, because each one of us is called to a total witness. The Pontiff has rightly said that each one of us must be ready for all those people who are about to arrive. Ready not to speak with words, ready to testify with deeds, the true teachings of this church, the true teachings of Jesus, the validity of the Father's commandments, and each of us in this testimony is called to give himself in totality, is called to insist on the journey of faith, but don't insist with those who don't want to accept. With those who, as it happened for Jesus in Nazareth, they did not want to understand, they did not want to marry, they did not want to embrace the incarnated love, the light that had descended in their midst. So many people we have that surround us, those who understand, those who do not want to understand, those who accept, those who do not accept, go beyond, advance. Insist only on your pursuit of perfection, never be satisfied. I especially speak to the young people. I remember the words of John Paul I, when he said, "If I had known to what I was called to, I would have prepared myself better." Don't be satisfied then, because you don't know what God is calling you to. Give the best of yourselves, to God and the brothers around you, to your friends. Be a total emanation of Christ and Mary, be sincere all of you towards this God, give Him love, live joyfully this journey, emanate that peace that true sons of God must emanate to truly belong to Christ's truth. Be strong, but with yourselves, be strong with your limitations, be strong against all the obstacles that unfold before you. But with your brothers, be gentle, be humble, be simple, so that you may be true emanation of the living fidelity to Christ the Lord, who will reign forever and ever. 2 Sundays ago you were told, continue to have faith. Last Sunday it was said to you, do not be ashamed of Jesus. Today this church says to you, advance to the end. Advance so that you may be assumed in Mary, with Mary, and for Mary. And so be it.